Hello, and welcome back to the English Grammar course, taught by me, Marian. I'm excited to be back on this grammar journey with you today. Before we move on to today's topic on the past perfect tense, let's review the present perfect tense, the subject of our last lesson. We use the present perfect to indicate an action that started in the past and is still happening in the present. She's had a hard time this year. Notice that she's is the contraction of she has. She has had a hard time this year. We also use the present perfect to talk about an experience that happened at a non-specific time in the past, or that is still a valid experience today. I've never been happier. Once again, I've is a contraction of I have. I have never been happier. To form the present perfect, we use the sentence construction subject plus have or has, depending on what the subject is, plus the past participle. They have eaten a whole cake. Or its contracted form, they've eaten a whole cake. To form negative sentences with the present perfect, we use the structure subject plus have or has plus not plus past participle. We can also contract have not and has not to form haven't or hasn't. I have not found your necklace. I haven't found your necklace. To ask questions in the present perfect, we use the construction have or has plus subject plus past participle. Have they bought a new sofa? Excellent work! To use adverbs with the present perfect tense, we can place the adverb between the auxiliary verb have or has and the verb in the past participle, or we can place the adverb at the end of the sentence. I've never been skydiving. She's improved her grades so quickly. Great work! Now let's practice. Which sentence is correct? I has broken the television. I have broken the television. The second sentence is correct. With the pronoun I, we use the auxiliary have. They haven't asked for permission to go yet. They yet haven't asked for permission to go. The first sentence is correct. We use the adverb yet typically at the end of a sentence, not the beginning. Have you ever been to America? Have you ever been to America? The second sentence is correct. To form the present perfect, we use the past participle and not the infinitive or present simple forms. She haven't washed the car yet. She hasn't washed the car yet. The second sentence is correct. We use the auxiliary has not with the third person singular pronoun she. We've always been poor. We always been poor. The first sentence is correct. Don't forget to use the auxiliary have or has when forming the present perfect. It hasn't rained much today. It hasn't rained much today. The second sentence is correct. HASN''T is the correct way to contract has not. She's ate all the candy. She's eaten all the candy. The second sentence is correct. The verb eat must be in the past participle and not the past simple tense. Well done! It's time to move on to the past perfect. If the present perfect is mainly used to describe an action that began in the past and is ongoing now, the past perfect is generally used to indicate an action that started and ended at different times in the past. Therefore, we use the past perfect to show the order of two past events. I had been single for 5 years when I met Tom. This sentence indicates an ongoing action in the past. I had been single, and indicates the time at which that action stopped, when I met Tom. Notice how the past perfect is often followed by the past simple, in this sentence with the verb met. Therefore, we combine the past perfect with the past simple to indicate that an action was ongoing when another interrupted it. When my mom arrived, I had finished making dinner. Arrived is in the past simple tense. Had finished is the past perfect tense. Notice how we can change the order of the sentence without changing its meaning. I had finished making dinner when my mother arrived. When my mother arrived, I had finished making dinner. It's important to pay attention to the order of the clauses in order to use correct pronunciation. When the main clause is at the beginning of the sentence, we do not need a comma. When the subordinate clause, in this example, when my mother arrived, is at the beginning of the sentence, we must follow it with a comma. Either way you write the sentence, the meaning remains the same. It's also very important to note that if there is a single event that happened in the past, especially at a specific time, then we do not use the past perfect. For example, the boys played guitar at the talent show. This is a one-time event. Therefore, we use the past simple. The boys had played guitar at the show is incorrect. To form the past perfect, we use the structure subject plus had plus past participle. The movie had started when we arrived at the cinema. The movie is the subject, had is the auxiliary verb, and started is the past participle form of the verb to start. As usual, in spoken and informal written English, we generally use contractions with the past perfect. We form it by combining the subject and the auxiliary verb had and replacing the letters HA with an apostrophe. I had, I'd. You had, you'd. He, she, it had. He'd, she'd, it'd. Although we don't usually contract it with the auxiliary had, because it doesn't make the flow of the sentence any easier. And after all, that is the point of contractions. We had, we'd. You had, you'd. They had, they'd. For example, we'd eaten all our snacks before we even reached the top of the mountain. They began feeling sick after they'd eaten the steak. Great work! Time for practice. Can you fill in the gaps using the correct subject and past perfect form? When I left the taxi, I realized that I'd forgotten my keys inside. She'd read the dictionary twice by the time she turned 11 years old. Noticed how we use the past simple tense with the verb turn following the past perfect tense to indicate that an action ended at a specific time in the past. I looked at the photograph and remembered that I'd seen that man before. Sadly, the house had burned down by the time the firefighters arrived. I couldn't see the game live. It had finished by the time I could get off work. They were full of energy because they'd slept so well. If you'd listened to me, you would have got the internship. Great work! Now, how to form negative constructions in the past perfect? Well, we use the construction subject plus had plus not plus the past participle. We can contract had and not to form hadn't. For example, I had not been to this museum before. They hadn't met their nephew this time last year. To ask questions in the past perfect, we use the construction had plus subject plus past participle. Had you ever seen a real elephant before? Excellent work! Practice time again. Can you fill in the gaps using question or negative forms in the past perfect tense? It was time to leave, but Annie hadn't showered yet. They hadn't arrived at the party when I got there. Had they eaten the whole cake, or were you able to have some? Had she moved to Madrid when you broke up with her? She hadn't chosen a name when he suggested Marco. They hadn't left when I arrived. Great work! Now, it is common to use adverbs with the past perfect, and some adverbs are more frequently used than others. We place the following adverbs between the auxiliary had and the past participle. For example, already. We'd already left the house by the time it started raining. Already means before the specified time. Still, which means as previously. Had you still not finished your homework at 4 p.m.? Just, which means a very short time before the specified time. I had just checked the time when the buzzer rang. Ever, which means at any time before the specified time. Had you ever visited Thailand before that trip? The specified time is that trip, and ever indicates any point in time before the trip. Never, which means at no time before the specified time. I never seen a real giraffe before that trip to the zoo. All right, practice time. Can you choose the correct sentence? She didn't have a sandwich as she just had one less than an hour ago. She didn't have a sandwich as she just had one less than an hour ago. The second sentence is correct. In this sentence, we have two uses of had. The first one is the auxiliary verb, whereas the second one is the main verb in the past participle form. We must place the adverb just between the auxiliary and the past participle. When I got to the party, Ben had already left. When I got to the party, Ben already had left. The first sentence is correct. The adverb must be placed between the auxiliary and the main verb. I had a driving lesson yesterday. I was nervous because never I'd driven before. I had a driving lesson yesterday. I was nervous because I'd never driven before. The second sentence is correct. The thieves had just escaped when the police arrived. The thieves had escaped just when the police arrived. The first sentence is correct. Had you met someone from India before Raj ever? Had you ever met someone from India before Raj? The second sentence is correct. The adverb ever is not placed at the end of a sentence, but between, you guessed it, the auxiliary verb and the past participle. It was the most beautiful bridge I'd ever seen. It was the most beautiful bridge I'd seen ever. That's right. The first sentence is correct. Great work. Now it's time for a task-based activity. Here is an excerpt from the famous and popular novel Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. We will start by reading this excerpt together. Then you will have 3 minutes to identify all the uses of the past perfect tense. Let's get reading. So, as I chanted each verse, I realized that I needed to find something or somebody to whom I could devote this hymn of pure love. But something had been stopping me short from offering up that love in sincerity. Nick, my nephew, is an 8-year-old boy, skinny for his age, scarily smart, frighteningly astute, sensitive, complex. He is a gift from God to all of us. I told him this fact through this old Sanskrit scripture, and soon I noticed that I was weeping cool tears. But before I could wipe the tears away, the Guru Gita was over. The hour and a half was finished. It felt like 10 minutes had passed. I realized what had happened, that Nikki had carried me through it. The little soul I'd wanted to help had actually been helping me. All right, let's go. Time's up! There are 5 instances of the past perfect in this text. 10 minutes had passed. I realized what had happened. The little soul I'd wanted to help had actually been helping me. Notice in the last example how the adverb actually is placed between the auxiliary verb and the past participle. Great job today! Now let's review. We use the past perfect to speak about an action that started and ended at different moments in the past, usually because it was interrupted by another event. For example, the song had just finished when they decided to go home. To form the past perfect, we use the structure subject plus had plus past participle. I had never drunk iced tea before coming to the USA. And we can also contract the subject with the auxiliary had. I'd had enough of his bad attitude, so I left the dinner party. To form negative sentences in the past perfect, we use the structure subject plus had plus not plus past participle, or we can use this construction with the contraction hadn't. I had not drunk a drop of water all day. I was so thirsty. I hadn't said anything, but he got really angry. To ask questions in the past perfect, we use the structure had plus subject plus past participle. Had Tom made breakfast when you got up? It is common to use the following adverbs with the past perfect: already, just, still, ever, never. We place them between the auxiliary verb and the past participle. I invited my brother to join us, but he'd already made other plans. Great work! We have finished today's lesson on the past perfect. Next class, onwards we go with the future perfect. See you then!